Hello, everybody. Andy Jacob here with the DotCom Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series. I have a great show today. I've been waiting for a number of weeks for this particular show because we have brought in a real leader in the space on the show. I'm so honored to have Alexander Franzen on the show today. He is the founder and CEO of a company called Carbon Calories. Of course, Alexander also was the founder and creator of wikicarbon.org, which is a great website so many people go to with an extensive background, really in environmental impact consulting, really financial consulting with regard to what happens with this thing that everybody's talking about. I have so many questions. I want to get right to it, but we're going to be talking about the carbon footprint today. And we're going to be talking about what companies need to do to make sure that they're transparent with regard to their carbon emissions and what it's all about. Alexander is a real leader in the field. Alexander, welcome to the DotCom Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series today.
Hi, Andy. It's really a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the warm introduction.
It's great to have you. I mean, you're an artist and you've done so much. The art behind you is something that you've done, and we're going to get into all that when we talk about entrepreneurship. But before we get started, you've been able to take this love and passion for art and turn it into a love and passion for the environment, a love and passion for helping companies build their businesses. Let's talk about Carbon Calories. Let's pull the lens back, as we always do, to start the show, to 30,000 feet. Tell us about Carbon Calories, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah. So, I mean, Carbon Calories, the short five-word liner, we do carbon accounting for small businesses and SMEs. And so we make carbon accounting easy and accessible for them. And that's really that's our focus, is on making carbon accounting easy and accessible for companies, because they all need to be doing it. So that's Carbon Calories. But, we have tools offline, I could talk hours about it, but in short, carbon accounting, the work that needs to be done is brands need to be doing some of the work compiling data and sort of understanding carbon accounting to a certain extent, but we really want to make tools available that can make it much easier for brands, much more affordable, so that they can start sort of like planning their decarbonization. And that's one of the biggest hurdles I see for that kind of work, is just the workflow and the cost of carbon accounting. And so that's really what we're tackling.
I mean, this is fantastic, Alexander. You're obviously a young guy. I mean, you built your first lifestyle carbon footprint calculator all the way back in 2013. I mean, you represented at the National International Conference of Climate Change in 2015. You're a well-known speaker. You travel throughout the world talking about this. Let's talk about it. What types of companies reach out or will be reaching out to Carbon Calories and saying, hey, Alexander, we need some help. What do we do here? How do we account for this? What's it all about?
Definitely. So we focus on, the carbon statement that we put together, and the methodology that I designed, and the uniform framework for reporting is product agnostic. And so we plan to service all types of brands. Part of the benefit of being product agnostic is that when we do compile information on products, we can actually compare them to different lifestyle activities by consumers. And that helps consumers to understand what the companies are reporting, because one hurdle or one challenge for companies is, suppose a company does a product carbon footprint. Well, what do we do with it? Because there's not like, consumers aren't educated about this, and so there is an education hurdle to overcome for consumers. And so, being product agnostic and brand agnostic and industry agnostic, we can do work for any company. But our focus right now really is startups and small businesses, and we're focusing on consumer goods originally, and we're focusing on fashion, apparel, and beauty. So those are the subsector within consumer goods that we're focusing on. We could do work for any type of industry, really, or any company. But the reason why we're focusing on small brands and startups is because they are actually innovators and early adopters when it comes to integrating decarbonization and low environmental impact from the beginning as like a core business thesis. Unlike some of the larger cap companies that have been in the game for 50 years, they're a little bit late to the game, and they made their money while fossil fuels were less challenged and when we didn't have the same pressure to decarbonize. And so they're just they're not the right target market for our solution. Our solution is also designed for it's not as integrated, as advanced as a large cap company. For example, like Gap or PVH or Nike or Adidas, they have 10,000 products maybe in their portfolio of umbrella companies and subsidiaries. They use Oracle, SAP, they have like advanced POS, inventory systems, and our solutions aren't yet at the point that we can service them, and it would be a lot more expensive. So we're focusing on startups, small businesses, fashion, beauty, fashion, apparel, and beauty industry. And we just want them to start using our tools to really cost effectively and easily prepare product carbon footprints for their tools. And then we'll be able to give them some benchmarking information from that. You know, if we have hundreds of fashion brands and we have product carbon footprints from them, we'll be able to tell them, okay, where do you sit in the market? You know, that is valuable information, because if they want to start marketing their product, where you sit and how you benchmark is that's important information for them to start differentiating.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Of course, so many companies, small to mid-sized startup companies, they want to take ownership over the carbon intensity of not only their lifestyle, but their brand and their company as well. And you allow them to do that. Now, one thing that's very interesting, I recently interviewed a young lady. She's got a great startup. She's doing fashion wear, sportswear. And on your website, you have this super cool sort of tag that you show where it's a carbon statement for a t-shirt. And then, of course, you go through this, what's going on with the carbon statement and what you've developed and what you've determined to be that t-shirt sort of carbon statement. In this particular case on the website, you show that the t-shirt has a low carbon statement. So let's talk about that, because that's a super great idea.
Yeah, I mean, so the carbon statement is it looks like a nutrition label. And I when I started ideating how to convey product carbon footprints effectively, 12 years ago, I honed in on product level. Product level is what consumers need to make decisions. It's what I don't need to buy Adidas or Nike. I need a new pair of running shoes this weekend, or I don't need to buy Starbucks or Joe and the Juice. I just need to know which coffee. And so product level is what we focus on. And so how to convey that effectively, consumers? Well, the nutrition labels set the standard for that. And the nutrition label, it was in the 70s and 80s that companies were trying it out. By the 90s, the NEA Act was passed that sort of standardized it. But nutrition labels gives everyone a benchmark, or the 2,500, 3,000 calories. I forget exactly what the amount is, but that's how many recommended calories we have. And so from that, you can compare any bag of chips with the other. You can compare different types of foods with each other. And so that methodology, which works and which people are familiar with, is what I wanted to do for carbon accounting and for product level emissions. So the t-shirt, the nutrition label as it's designed, it's called the carbon statement. And at the bottom, there's a percentage. It's called the daily carbon quota. That is the sort of equitable, or just it takes the global carbon budget and then allocates it pro rata to every global citizen in equal proportion. And so that's just for the purposes of benchmarking. And so each product, you can compare it to that percentage. And then the interesting thing about the t-shirt is that, and the reason why fashion is such a good example for how companies need to think about and how consumers also need to think about product carbon footprinting, is this t-shirt that I'm wearing, manufacturing it, growing the cotton, cutting it, sewing it, dyeing it, probably accounts for half of the product carbon footprint, maybe less. The rest of it is how I wash and dry it. Now, I've had this t-shirt for about 10 years, I think. It's my favorite t-shirt. I try and hang dry it if I can. And it turns out that if you hang dry a t-shirt, you can actually reduce the carbon footprint over its lifespan by 25%. And so it's okay, well, so it is companies that need to get involved, and they need to be transparent about the product carbon footprint of their t-shirt. And they need to try and use regenerative agricultural methods to generate the cotton, like non-toxic dyes, limited scrap loss, and other activities that they need to do. And then their manufacturing facility, they need to try and construct solar arrays to power it so that they're not relying on fossil fuels. And then consumers, they have to understand that. And then we have to actually use the products efficiently and effectively and for a long period of time, because There's no such thing as a low carbon t-shirt that you only wear it twice. You have to wear the t-shirt 100 times. Otherwise, it's no longer low carbon. And so it's like, that's where the carbon statement works, because it's like it's a participation, it's a collaboration between companies and consumers. And I think that is very hard to convey in like digestible language. But the carbon statement, like I that's the best way that I can think of doing it. And you know, like I literally, I remember I was sitting at the desk in 2017 when I thought about the daily carbon quota. And I calculated the number, and it was like 3,000. And I thought to myself, oh, that's kind of like the daily recommended calories. And I was like, carbon calories. And that's where the name came from. That's how the name came.
I love it. I mean, it's brilliant when you look at it, because when we think about carbon statement and we think about what you've done, everybody, when they think about, in this case, we're talking about the t-shirt example, you know, you think about the manufacturing and what goes on pre-manufacturing, and maybe to manufacture the t-shirt, and then the product distribution. But what a lot of people forget about is there's a lot that goes on after that. What about the transportation from retail to home, the washing of the fabric or the t-shirt? Do you hang dry it? Do you throw it in the dryer? You know, what's the end of life disposal look like in your particular case? And same for me, this t-shirt is my favorite t-shirt. I wear it all the time.
Yeah.
So that carbon statement just made all the sense, because when I looked at it, my team looked at it, we're like, wow, he's really nailed something here, because it makes people think. And I think one of the things that you're known for in your career, Alexander, is making people think about it. Where did that come from, where you said to yourself, you know, if I can get something together where people start thinking, then I can impact the world just by getting people to think about this thing? Is that the way, sort of the way in which you approach it?
Yeah, it's you know, the solutions to decarbonization and climate change technologically have been available for decades. And so if you just think about it, just logically, okay, well, we've been able to solve this really for all the years, all the decades that we've known about it. And I mean, Lyndon B. Johnson got a letter from his scientific advisors, and I believe it was 1965, warning them about the potential impact of climate change. And like Andrei Sakharov, the climate change, he used another term, but in short, I thought that, you know, we have the solutions and we have the technologies. So this is a communication challenge that need to be solved. We need to figure out a way for people to understand these relatively complex topics, but it really, one very important factor that isn't talked about enough is the need for consumers to think about how they use products. You know, I can, another example of a carbon statement that's online next to the t-shirt carbon statement, and it's the same graphics, the same layout, is the Polestar EV. And so that electric vehicle, which is great, is much more carbon intensive to manufacture than a gasoline powered car. And so it's only when you use it as an alternative over a long period of time that it actually recuperates and is lower carbon. And so like, that's another way to think about how, okay, well, it's not enough. We can't just buy our way into sustainability. We actually have to like incorporate new ways or remember how we used to use products. Like we used to have pass-me-downs. You know, we used to repair our clothes. We used to inherit furniture. And there was a reason for that. It's because that's actually very efficient. It's very low carbon. You know, I have a table in my kitchen. It's 50 years old. It's definitely more carbon intensive to manufacture than any IKEA table I could have bought, but no IKEA table is going to be 50 years old and still stand up and be perfectly in order. So it's like that's an important thing to think about, and that's what I try to convey in the carbon statement by showing sort of like scenarios, low, base, high, and so that's but really it's about thinking and understanding the way that we operate in a society and the way that energy and carbon emissions, like it's not sort of like black and white all the time. You know, we really have to think about it as consumers and make smart decisions before and after we purchase a product.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Of course, with your statement, you know, in this particular case, the Polestar 2, which is the vehicle you talk about, the production stage, the carbon footprint is high, but then when you get into the consumption stage, then it gets low, and then your calculator determines what the daily, you know, carbon quota is. Is that the way it works?
Yeah, and so we not only can we help companies to prepare product carbon footprints and do that accounting. But in the case of Polestar, they actually released the results from their life cycle assessment, which is the formal term for the methodology for preparing a product carbon footprint. So those particular numbers were released from Polestar, and so they provided scenario projections. But it's essentially like if you have like the Polestar, the EV, much more carbon intensive to manufacture because you'll have the battery, for example, is more carbon intensive. In a gasoline powered car, you don't need to have such a high quality battery. I think that they are heavier. I think you need a different type of reinforcement and structure. The wheels might be heavier or might have more material for the same reason because they would otherwise wear down. And so manufacturing it, more carbon emissions than a standard gasoline car. But then over the next decade, as you drive it, especially if you have an EV in like Norway, which is hydro, 100% hydro, or if you're in New York City or New York State, which actually has a relatively low carbon intensity per unit of kilowatt hour compared to the American national average. If you drive it in a state or a country like that, you'll actually, over time, you're using much less emissions and causing much less emissions than if you were driving a gasoline powered car. So like over time, you're going to be having a lower carbon footprint, but it depends on that, how you use it, and if you carpooled and had an EV, even better.
I love it. I mean, it's really well thought out. It's easy to see why you're one of the leaders in this space. I'm thinking about it right now. I walk into a boutique and there's 2 T-shirts, and one T-shirt has your carbon statement. And I see that, the daily carbon quota it's a really good like percentage. It's a good number, but the other T-shirt, they don't have the carbon statement. So I'm holding the 2 T-shirts. I would think that the company that has used the carbon statement has a competitive advantage as well, because I would rather buy that T-shirt knowing that they're participating and they're interested in it, right?
Absolutely. And before a company decides to disclose, they would like, in order to be smart about it, you're going to want to know where you sit relative to your market competitors. So even if you don't want to disclose, you're still going to want to do carbon accounting. But if it turns out that you're in the lower 50th percentile, or even if your product is average, it might still help you to disclose, because Gen Y and Gen Z in particular are looking for companies that are willing to disclose transparently what their carbon footprint is. And the big elephant in the room, guys, like we're emitting way too much emissions right now, and it's going to take at least 30, if not 50 years to decarbonize the energy grid. We have to manufacture something like 250 plus a nuclear power plant's worth of renewable energy facility or renewable generating facilities each year just to replace all the fossil fuels. So it's going to take 30 years. And so meanwhile, we need to start actually benchmarking and showing ourselves and showing consumers how we are going to be decarbonizing. And it's going to take a long time. We can't build solar overnight. You have to find land. You have to have like a PPA. You have to like set up the lease terms. You have to actually construct it. That takes time. And so regenerative agriculture, that takes time. You have to like maybe convert the land, no-till methodology, like restorative agriculture. You might have lower yield for a period of time. So it's like that takes time. But meanwhile, companies that show consumers where they sit and say, hey, we're willing to baseline ourselves. This is where we are now. And we're committing to reducing our carbon footprint. And these are the things that we're going to do. And we're going to show you our progress. Consumers, I think, would love that. Even if you're not necessarily the lowest carbon product yet, consumers are like, yeah, we trust you because you're willing to show us. And like that'll make all the difference, I think, for up and coming brands this decade, especially.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Maybe you're not at the best level today, but you make the commitment to become a better sort of global citizen, and people will see that, and that will resonate for them through carbon calories. That makes all the sense in the world, Alexander. I want to get into Go ahead. I think you had one more point.
I think that's a really important point that you highlight there, because it's like I'm not a utility provider. Like I can't control who builds solar or wind in New York City. Like Con Edison provides all our electricity here, so it's like wherever you are, it's another utility provider. And most companies, especially small businesses, aren't in the power of manufacturing solar or wind. And so it's like they are dependent and reliant upon other organizations to start sort of like taking that work up. And so for everyone, we're at different places. we have different control over different areas of our supply chain. And so it's like, but we all just need to start sort of like saying where we are, being honest about it, and then we can work from there. Otherwise we're just fooling ourselves.
Yeah, it's powerful, and you become a leading voice in the field. I want to get to talk to you about entrepreneurship, but before we do, and thank you so much for slicing out some time today. This has been great.
Yeah,
I'm going to have you back on the show because there's so much to unpack here. Let's talk about the fashion industry, Alexander. I mean, here we have this big gala here in the past 24 hours. I think Fashion Week is, soon happening, where, people are running runways in Paris.
They had it last month. I think they just had Fashion Week. This is good timing.
They just had it. Okay, thank goodness my wife didn't know about it. She would have wanted to go buy some haute couture fashion. So let's talk about the fashion industry. I mean, are they getting on board? When we see Fashion Week, are the designers now starting to pay more attention to carbon calories and product level carbon accounting? Where's the fashion industry right now?
Yeah, they are actually. One of the reasons why I chose to focus on the fashion industry is because they've had a lot of pressure for several years to think about the sustainable their impact of their both in terms of like fair wages too, like all ESG metrics, environmental impacts like plastic or eutrophication of land or CO2 emissions, and then wage rights, fair wages, and in terms of governance, like they really have had pressure for several years now, and so many brands are tackling the issues as best they can. There's in the fashion industry, like in every industry, there is a long supply chain of companies, many of whom are in developing countries or in countries where the regulations might not be as controlled or as reliable as, for example, in Europe or America. But these brands have had pressure from consumers. And that's one of the great things about fashion is that it's a very consumer-facing brand, or it's a very consumer-facing industry. We all wear clothes. We all have to we like expressing ourselves with our clothes. There's cultural decisions here. It's a great industry to work with. And I think that I've heard of brands that are 100% recycled cotton or denim. I know brands that are bicycle delivering 50% of their sold product. Brands that are recycling back and reusing fabrics. There are so many brands that are doing a lot of really cool activities. And I think that needs to be highlighted for consumers, because that we need to know about that. Like, I learned about it because I've been digging for 2 years now almost, and like trying to find these brands and trying to reach out to them. So it's like consumers really, there's a lot to be learned and there's a lot to be seen in that industry. And so I'm excited about the fashion industry. I really think that there's a lot of brands that maybe aren't moving as fast as they could be. Perhaps larger cap are less able, they're more constrained, but there are plenty of brands in the fashion industry that are moving and that are starting to decarbonize and think about it and try and incorporate other environmental impact measures in their business operations. Like Gani is a great brand from Denmark. I'm actually from Denmark. And so Gani, I'm proud that Gani they have an internal team. I think they call themselves a laboratory that actually researches and works on how to incorporate environmental impact measures into their operations. So that's one example of a brand, but there are hundreds of brands that are doing really cool work. So yeah, that industry they feel the pressure. And I think that many of them are responding, many of the companies.
You have something coming up that's very, very important. It's a boot camp. I mean, I love boot camps. I mean, we talk to people that run boot camps in all different types of spaces, whether it's, business opportunities or entrepreneurship or becoming better at the online marketing, whatever it is. But your boot camp coming up is going to change the world. Tell us about the boot camp, because I love it.
Yeah. So the carbon boot camp, the way we've designed it is that, in order to really bring the price point down for brands, it makes it much easier for carbon calories to do the work that brands need to do by doing it as like a sort of boot camp style. Companies that start the boot camp, that join, that's going to be starting in April 1st is our target date. It might start April 15th, but it's going to start in April. And we're targeting fashion brands and we're targeting cosmetics brands. We might have 2 tracks for this boot camp. But the idea is that over this 16 to 18 week period, each brand is going to be going through the same work each week. We're going to be managing the data compilation work. We're going to be educating them, hand-holding them a little bit along the way as they're preparing their product carbon footprints. And then by the end of it, each brand will have a product carbon footprint for something like 10 to 15 products that they choose. And then for the brands that participate, they're going to be able to have a anonymized portfolio of benchmark like products that they're going to be able to compare their product to. And so at the end of this, each brand should have product carbon footprints for their core products. They'll know where they sit relative to the market. And so this information really is going to be useful to them. And, this could be the first 100 brands that collectively start reporting product carbon footprints to consumers. So this is exciting. You could be a leader in the space.
I love it. And of course, at your company, at Carbon Calories, you have carbon ambassadors, and you've got a great list of people that are helping you out. And it's really awesome for anybody interested. Reach out to Alexander. This is fantastic. Now, before I let you go, and again, thank you so much for slicing only, a certain amount of time out. You're busy changing the world. So I'm very delighted to have had you on the show. You're an artist, and one of the paintings or drawings is behind you, and we spoke about it a little bit before the show, and it's just remarkable. We spoke a little bit about it, a mutual passion we have for a particular artist.
Yeah.
What have you taken from your love of art into the entrepreneurial realm? In other words, we have a lot of younger entrepreneurs that watch the show, and sometimes they hit a roadblock, sometimes they hit a pothole in the road. Maybe as an artist, you have to pull away from the painting once in a while and sort of kind of get a breath and then go back into it. What have you taken from your art experience as an artist and taken it into your entrepreneurial journey on what to do when you hit a pothole or you need to stop and take a deep breath to move forward?
That's a great question, actually. So I know that when I draw, often the drawing, I don't have a clear picture of what I'm drawing when I start. Like, I didn't know how this was going to look when I started. I started with the figures in the middle. That's based on a Rodin sculpture. And then I knew I wanted that in my drawing, but the rest of it, I hadn't figured out the spatial alignment or necessarily picked the room. And I didn't know that I was going to put trees that are coming into the space. And so a lot of the work when you're an artist, it's sort of like it comes to you. You have to be receptive to what you're being told or what you're receiving as you make the art. And so I would say that that's good advice for an entrepreneur, is that, yeah, you are going to hit potholes. It's going to be an emotionally volatile journey. You're going to need to learn to listen to what the market is saying, because, especially if you're a visionary entrepreneur that's trying to bring a new solution or a new product to the market, then you need to be sure that that product is something the market needs or wants, and you need to listen to the market to understand that, and you might need to pivot. And so to be adaptive to what you're being told is an important characteristics for an entrepreneur. And I think that that's similar to what artists do. Like, a true artist, when you're making your work, you're channeling, you're receiving that art. You're channeling something, and you're sublimating your energy, and you're focusing and you're concentrating. And that's kind of what you do, I think, as an entrepreneur, is that you really have to draw on everything to channel that energy and make a company out of what your idea is.
I love it. That's a great analogy, that you're channeling that energy to create something that's amazing. And that's really what you've been able to do at Carbon Calories. Before I let you go, there's going to be so many people that are saying to themselves, well, I'd love to get involved. I mean, Andy spoke about the carbon ambassadors, and this whole idea that Carbon Calories is leading the charge with just sounds so exciting. What's the next step for people that are saying to themselves, hey, I want to get involved, or maybe I've got a startup and maybe I want to get the tag that, that Alexander provides through Carbon Calories? How do they get a hold of you?
So any brand that wants to prepare product carbon footprints or just start a discussion and consider doing it, they can reach out to us on our website. They can contact at carboncalories.com. There's a contact link on our website. And for any consumers or any individuals, influence perhaps, or any consumer really that knows about a brand, that maybe is in touch, one of their friends is a startup founder, or they have a connection to a brand and they would like to see that brand use Carbon Calories statement. If you recommend that brand to us, if you connect us, then you can become a carbon ambassador. And we're going to be releasing a symbol, like a badge that you could receive as a carbon ambassador. And we really want the public and everyone to get involved with this because, product carbon footprints, they're not a punitive measure. We're here to like decarbonize, and that's a collaborative effort. And so we need everyone on board to be helping out. And so brands can reach out to us on our website, and people can connect us with brands, and they can also reach out to us on our website, or they could go to carbondiplomats.com and you could become a carbon ambassador if you recommend a brand. And so we're excited to speak with everyone that wants to discuss product carbon accounting.
I love it. What a great mission-driven company you've built. I mean, you're pushing for greater transparency and, of course, individual agency as well in the carbon emissions ecosystem. What a great interview. I'm going to bring you back on the show, Alexander. I'm so excited about what you're doing. I can't wait to see your report card, on so many things that I buy and my wife buys and everybody buys, because it just makes all the sense in the world. So I wanted to thank you so much for coming on the .com Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series today. This has been a great interview.
Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure speaking to you, Andy.